This is a very unique night, and it's amazing, actually, on multiple levels. And one of those is the last time we did a screening, I think we had about a dozen people show up. And we obviously know who we have here, Mr. Bob Hoover. And one of his concerns... Thanks. On behalf of Mr. Hoover, thank you. So, I've met a lot of semi-famous and famous people over the years, and lots of times the reality of how you think the person is does not match the truth. And Bob always comes across as this consummate Southern gentleman, and the truth could not be any more truer than that. His concern when we posed this idea of him coming tonight and being honored and us enjoying this amazing documentary on this incredible life was he didn't think anybody would know who he was and would really be that interested. So that's how humble the man is. So first off, this is a movie night. So we got refreshments. Like a movie, you can get up and go get your drinks, get your stuff. I just ask that you try to be quiet about it. We can't just sit here and wait for everybody to get their drinks, so we just need to get going. Bob is such a national treasure that we're going to spend a few minutes and ask a couple questions and give a little bit of the background about tonight for people that don't know. I really don't need to introduce too much because it's all in the documentary. And this really got my attention when we were sent a copy of it, and Paula Smith pulled me aside. She said, I turned this thing on, and I was doing SETP business and casually watching it, and it was in the background. And she goes, I kept on, it riveted me. I just kept on having to go back and ignore other stuff and watch it. It's an amazing film, so you should watch it. So I did, and my wife Cheryl wanted to see it, and she totally was really enthralled with it. And I said, well, I think we got a movie night, so let's do something about this. So the amazing thing about, there's too many amazing things, but one is Bob Hoover is the only two-time SETP president, only two-term president. And, that really says a lot. One is he might not have the best judgment to accept it twice. But obviously how well-loved and how great of a job he did. And, when he was SETP president, at the banquet, he got Neil Armstrong and Charles Lindbergh to show up together. So that one's pretty tough, but I'll be able to say I got Bob Hoover. So tonight, I've got to pull this one out because I don't have Kim as well memorized. So we have Kim Furst here, who is an award-winning producer, director, and documentary film editor. Since 2003, she's been known for her editing work with the aviation film industry with credits such as Discovery Channel's three-part series, Rocket Challenge, the popular general aviation documentary, 16 Right, Wings Over the Rockies, starring Harrison Ford, and the PBS series, A Horseman Cometh, about a modern three-ship P-51 formation aerobatic team. She also spent 3 years as a studio executive producing scores of documentaries for big-budget studio features, including Mission Impossible 3, for which she earned a Golden Satellite Award, that industry's highest award. As producer-director, Kim has been recognized at many international film festivals for her work, including most recently the 2014 Grand Prize Soldiers and Sacrifice Award for Flying the Feathered Edge, the movie you'll see tonight. It's interesting, Bob's got a lot of friends. A couple of them we tried real hard to get here tonight, and they wanted to come. One was Harrison Ford, who is unfortunately away on recurrency training for the Bell helicopter. And the other was Gene Cernan, the astronaut who's going to be inducted on Saturday night as a fellow. Unfortunately, he had some health challenges come up, so he can't be here either. So it's but we've got Bob, who is in amazing condition. So to start with Kim, my question is, how did you get involved with this, and what made you want to branch out and do a documentary about Bob?
Thank you so much, Forger. I appreciate the question. First of all, it's such an incredible privilege to stand here in front of you all. Your stories and what you do for a living is what inspires me. I've been making all kinds of films and documentaries over time in my career, but once I hit on one certain interview with Burt Rutan before he won the X Prize, I remember watching that interview in 2003 and saying, hey, boy, I don't think I've seen a story as good as this in a long time. Always loved aviation, but the privilege to be able to tell aviation stories is all mine. After 4 aviation stories, I was looking for one that I could spend a fair amount of time on and one that would capture my attention for my first full-length feature film as producer-director. I had made a lot of films for other people, and I was looking for the best story in aviation that I could find. My friend Sean D. Tucker and a couple of people in this audience, actually, Rich Lee, and there were some very accomplished aviators at a very special dinner for Mr. Hoover one night, and I got to be a fly on the wall and hear his stories. And during that time, I realized I didn't think there was anybody who deserved a big, glossy motion picture than Bob Hoover. And I was right. And I'm just so very, very, very honored that I had the ability to spend the last 3.5 years making his film. We've been all over the country with this film. We've got incredible people in it. Mr. Hoover has got friends that are a who's who of aviation. And as you can see, we've got Harrison Ford, Dick and Burt Rutan, Gene Cernan. It's just incredible, the people that we were able to interview for this film. But we're still a grassroots documentary. We've had screenings of up to 7,000 people. It's really taking off in the aviation community. And my little commercial is, you can be a big part of that. We're opening in theaters next month. AMC, Regency, and Landmark theaters will begin carrying Flying the Feathered Edge. So from wherever you've come from in the world, you can bring this film to your community. Go to the bobhooverproject.com to find out more. Thank you for your attention, and now I'm going to give you back to Mark Forger-Stuckey. Oh, thank you. Actually, and I also want to say I've had a lot of people asking about the DVD and the Blu-ray, if they're for sale. We actually weren't, we will have some after. If anyone wants to hang around and buy any, we will actually have a table out there. We'll also have a sign-up sheet for signed copies of Bob's book. So if you want to hang around for that, they make great Christmas presents. Thank you.
So before I start, you know, the movie's about an hour and a half, typical awesome movie. But I want to take advantage of having Bob here tonight. There's a lot of questions I'd like to ask. I think some of them are answered in the movie with all the different things he did. But when I saw the movie, one thing that really surprised me, or that I didn't realize in the history, was how Bob, you were at the Reno Air Races a lot, and you were there like the grand poobah safety guy airborne, where these guys would have their emergencies and Bob would talk them down. And he talked down a lot of people to safe landings. I guess I'd like to ask you, how did you prepare for that, and what'd you tell them?
Well, Mark, I guess, remember, I've been there this was my 52nd year consecutively. For 35 years, I started the races and played the role of safety pilot. And you have to realize a lot of these people have the financial wherewithal to buy very expensive airplanes and work with them until they've taken that old metal. Can you imagine? P-51s in those airplanes are 50 plus years old. And that metal has fatigue. And I've tried to caution them that what we don't know, and I've done this all over the world to Air Force fighter pilots. I would be lecturing them on flight safety, and I would have a piece of metal in my hands. And I would be doing this all the time I was talking. And I'd have this piece of sheet metal, aluminum, off of one of the airplanes. And I would be bending it like this. Well, the secret for me in knowing what cumulative damage is by the amount of heat that gets transmitted from this reaction. And so I could start out up close like this with these pieces of metal. And as I do this, to show you that it is cumulative, once the metal has been bent to a certain degree, its structure becomes less. The same is true with the old wooden fabric airplanes. So what I would do is with this piece of metal, as I'd feel the heat build up from this action, I'd have to go further and further. And at the point where I wished to have it break, it would break. And I would say, gentlemen, you think I've probably been pretty nervous up here doing this while I'm trying to explain things to you. But I want you to know that every time you over-G an airplane, it's cumulative. And it may not get you, but downstream somebody's just going to run into rough air or hit a thunderstorm and the wings are going to come off. And there's no question about it. That's what is going to happen and has happened. And I try to caution people, remember what the airplane was designed to do and don't go beyond that. And I have seen young people on the air show circuit, and they didn't know my background, but I tried to help them and say, look, fella, I know this airplane is not designed to take the structural abusement that you're giving it. You're exceeding its capabilities. Well, what does that old guy know about it? Well, the answer is a lot of them aren't here anymore. And I have seen more air show pilots get killed just because they didn't understand what was happening. But you as test pilots, you do know what's going on. But I'd like to just bring up some thoughts that are important to each of you and for me to convey to you. I call it the what ifs. First of all, I should back up and just say to you, I never thought I was any better than another pilot because I wasn't. I got airsick the first time I flew an airplane. I still get airsick if I ride with somebody else. If they're doing aerobatics. But normal flying doesn't bother me a bit. But I'm dead serious. I wanted to help people, and I tried to fly smoothly. And all of a sudden, I found out, because there was nobody to teach me aerobatics, I found out I could do a roll, scared myself to death because I ended up going straight down and luckily had enough altitude to pull out with a little 37 horsepower engine. And then I graduated to biplanes that had a lot more horsepower, and I found out that I could do a 4 and an 8-point roll. And then I found out if I worked hard enough, and I used 2,000 feet as an altitude, that I must never go below. No matter where I start out, I can't go below 2,000 feet. And whatever maneuver I tried to do, it's got to be out at 2,000 feet. And I worked at that until I could do 4, 8, and 16-point rolls and have just the right energy. So if you put up too high, your airflow over the control surface is such that the roll rate is so slow, you're going to end up with the nose coming down like this as you come out of a simple roll. But if you can train yourself to know how much energy you have, you can go up and do it like this in the climb and come back out and do it, stop at 2,000 feet. Well, I mastered that and in all kinds of different airplanes, with and without the engines running. But the other thing I want to bring to your attention is everybody's seen people fly inverted, and it's been going on since they had biplanes after the Wright brothers. But everything that has been done, it seems to all of us that it's already been accomplished. Well, flying inverted is not a big deal. You can learn to fly inverted just as well as you can learn to fly right side up. However, you got to put yourself to the test of what can I do and what can I not get away with. And most people don't really know what that limit is. Well, here's a limit that I'm going to suggest to you to consider. When you pull upside down and you get yourself into a negative G situation. Well, I'll just cite a real case. North American built the B-45 bomber, the first jet bomber. They could go 500 miles an hour and drop a bomb, and I was one of the test pilots on that program. And it was a great airplane. Well, in testing it, we had to open the bomb bay doors at 500 miles an hour at 100 feet off the deck. And I was able to do that, but the door came off, and the bomb bay door, and I had to open it, of course, just like I was going to drop a bomb, only they were dud bombs. And the door came off and took the elevator and stabilizer on one side. And that gets your attention. I figured I was going to have to land at about air speeds that higher than the airplane was ever designed for, and to have good controllability. And so I played with it until I found out what I could do, and then I put it down on a dry lake bed with 10 or 11 miles of lake bed. And I have to identify to you that the surface of that lake bed is far better than a concrete runway or an asphalt runway. The spin-up loads on an airplane in landing requires more structure in the airplane where the gear is attached to the airplane than anywhere else. And the same is likewise for the engines. You have to beef up that area where you have those kind of force requirements that demand it. Well, if in the case of landing fast, the spin-up loads, that gives you the big shock, and as you know, with transport airplanes, passenger airplanes, they all log by how many flights you've made. So they keep track of it, and they still are constantly worrying about it. But that spin-up load is something that we worried about for years, and we've all seen all those black marks when you taxi out to take off, and you're sitting on the numbers, you see all the tread marks on the runway. Well, on that leg bed, it has some sort of it's almost like a salt effect. After the rainy season, it dries out, the lake bed cracks up, and it looks like it'd be tough on everything, the landing gear and everything. But that powdery effect, I have landed at air speeds that would just blow your mind. Can you imagine sitting down at 240 knots and dead stick at that and having it? I never made a smoother landing in my life. Well, it's amazing what you can do when you must. Another example, that negative G can knock you out so quick and so easy if you go from negative to positive, unless you're physiologically trained for it. And I say that because most any of us can go out and fly inverted and roll right side up, but not abruptly. My dear friend Sean Tucker, whom I watched fly at his first air show, has mastered the ability through constant exercise and training. He has been able to pull 9 negative G's and go from 9 instantly to 9 positive, 9 negative to 9 positive. And people have been killed because of that transition. And that's what happened on the RB-45 with a namesake of mine by the name of Herb Hoover, who worked for NACA, which was what it was called before NASA. And he had to do that negative test, and it cost him his life. It has cost many lives, and still does. And you have to remember, don't do anything you haven't trained for. Sean Tucker and some of these other experts who have followed in his tracks, and Sean is really a rock star. I mean, to go from 9 in one direction to 9 in the other, most of us can't handle 9 Gs, certainly not for very long. And I can tell you, in some of my test work, I have had airplanes break up on me, and that was our problem about the sound barrier. I was on the X-1 program, Chuck and I was on before Chuck, and we were the guinea pigs for what a human being can withstand. They put us on a centrifuge and find out what we could survive with and take us right into unconsciousness. And I tell you, it's a pretty sick feeling. He and I would sometimes have upset stomachs for maybe 2 or 3 days in a row after we went on the centrifuge at some of those high Gs to where they took us to unconsciousness. And that's the problem about the transition. Sean works out every day. He walks, I don't know how far, it's a jog actually, with a 40-pound weight on him. And he practices every day in his airplane. And he keeps himself physically fit at everything he does. And he's got it the way he can do it. And I couldn't imagine that, because I tell you, I've been so uncomfortable on those transitions. I just can't tell you how uncomfortable you are. We've all been there sick one time or another. And that's what it's like.
I think that's one of the nice things in more recent years is the military services have put a lot of importance on the physical training so people can do better with long time tolerance of Gs because of G loss induced consciousness. I think we should probably get on with the movie since everybody's here is waiting for that. And can we roll the film?
Well, I'd like to make one other comment, if you wouldn't mind. And this has to do, I would like to thank you and the 2 companies who have sponsored you. It's magnificent that they have supported Mark as our president and the first space pilot who's been president of this organization. He has taken it to new horizons, high water marks over any president we've ever had. And boy, am I proud of you. I just have to tell you that. And I'm proud of your company for their support of you. This year, he has already met commitments that were all over the world because of our great society. And look what we have to show for it. You have made this one of the finest organizations in the world. It all started with that little handful of people, and I happened to have been one of them who was they asked me to be the first president. And I was with North American Aviation, and that cadre of test pilots said we ought to share information from one another to another, because look, we're killing people for the same damn reason. Just because we're working for different companies, I couldn't talk to somebody else that worked for another company and tell him what I'd experienced. I could have saved his life, or he could have saved mine. And that was the idea that we came up with initially. And look where it has developed into this magnificent organization that you're all a part of. And individually, I can only tell you, I'm so proud of each and every person who's a member of this organization, and the corporations who have supported us big time and put us on the map for the future of our aviation and aerospace. And I guess I probably talked enough, and thank you.
Well, those are some generous comments. Thank you very much. So we have a little bit more news, but in the interest of time, I'm going to wait, and then I'll just unveil that in the State of Society and a little bit in our President's Dinner. All right? Can we roll the movie?